In this episode, I was chatting with Audrey Farrelly. Audrey is our vision specialist and she's involved in the diagnosis of CVI. We discussed how it can be distinguished from optical vision impairments, how it is that parents can pick up on their children's CVI, and how it is that we understand visual processing. We hope that you enjoy. So, Audrey, you're here today to talk about CVI. What do we need to know about it?
Well, first of all, it's not as rare as people think it is. Many people in Ireland probably would have never heard of it, despite it being the leading cause of vision impairment in children at present. It's a neurological vision impairment, so therefore the children can have a perfectly normal eye report or go to the opticians and have no issues with their vision, but they're still having a lot of visual issues that no one can really explain. So it is a vision impairment that can only really be diagnosed by a neurologist or an ophthalmologist.
How is it that CVI is diagnosed in a young person? So, for example, what is it that parents might see or pick up on that would lead to a diagnosis being made?
Well, it could come through a variety of ways. Sometimes the children are quite young and there's been some damage or some trauma at birth. So like the child might have been premature or had some sort of a bleed at birth or something like that. So there are complications expected. So or lack of oxygen is another big thing that happens to little children in particular. At the back of the mind then of somebody in the hospitals, there CVI would always be a possibility because CVI is a result of some trauma to the brain, whether it's before birth or after birth or even during the birth itself. It can happen for trauma, it can happen in a brain injury, it can happen from a stroke, for example, or any time the brain particularly is starved of oxygen or has a lack of oxygen at any stage. CVI can result from that. And then it would just be observations from other professionals, doctors, parents, just finding that things are just not lining up and that the child is doing something that's different. And then when they have their vision checked, that the vision appears to be normal, but then the children are really struggling visually.
Yeah, that leads me on to my next question. How is it that we distinguish between CVI and what could be an optical vision impairment?
Usually with the optical vision impairment, there is some damage to the optical system, and that's really anywhere from the front of the eye all the way back to what we call the optic chiasma, which is it's sort of in the midbrain there. So from the optic chiasma back is where the visual information is processed, and it's along there that the information can be disrupted depending on what damage was done to the brain.
So where is it that we draw the line? Is there a certain part of the brain that needs to be affected, or is it between the brain and the eyes? How is it distinguished from optical vision impairments?
Well, cerebral really refers to the whole of the brain, where cortical generally refers to the visual cortex, which is at the back of your head, just right there. Generally in Europe, we refer to it as cerebral vision impairment, and cortical vision impairment is more commonly used in the States, for example. But they're both abbreviated to CVI. They're both a neurological vision impairment, and you can have damage in your visual cortex and also processing problems in cerebrum. So really, whether it's cerebral or cortical, we would assess the children the same way.
So what type of visual perception would a person with CVI have? What is it that they'll see, or what is it that they can't see?
It really is very different from child to child and person to person, very individualized. So we have children that would come in here with perfect vision, 6/6, but yet if I was to look at you, for example, even with my perfect vision, I don't know who you are until you give me another clue, for example, your voice. And then we have children who are significantly impacted by it and would actually maybe have a visual acuity where they're actually not able to see very much at all. So there's a huge range between that and CVI.
Okay, and of course then it's possible to have a mix of both, so you'd have to look at how to distinguish between the two.
Yeah, and also like children can have problems with the visual system and have visual processing as well. So some children will have a problem maybe with focusing or some actual visual impairment itself. And in addition to that, we'll have CVI.
Earlier we were chatting about prosopagnosia, which is a condition where it can be hard to distinguish between different features of faces or faces themselves, and that could also be part of CVI.
Yeah, so children sometimes with CVI, one of the areas noted that they find it hard to maybe identify people through faces alone. Now, what you have to figure out is that just purely as a relation to the CVI and visual processing, or is that a factor relating to low visual acuity, low contrast sensitivity, visual discrimination issues? So while it can be part of visual processing, it also could be something else. So we always have to tease out what exactly is causing the main problem. And also when it comes to prosopagnosia or face blindness, that can be a standalone condition as a whole. It doesn't have to be part of CVI. Could be visual processing, or it could be low visual acuity, low contrast sensitivity, and just don't see fine indeed.
Or potentially you get both, I suppose.
We can have all of it.
Yeah.
But then there's usually one causing it more than the other. But sometimes when they come here, they have a diagnosis of CVI, so they would have got the diagnosis from ophthalmology or neurology. And what we do here is we look at their functional vision, so we look at how they're actually using that vision. Now, as we said, it depends on each child. Every child's individual, and then some children do have additional needs as well. So you have to look at the child first. But they're very, very simple solutions. So, for example, I would never wear a top like this when I'm doing assessment. I would wear black, so therefore the child, when I'm giving them some visual material to look at, their vision is concentrating on what I'm giving them. So giving objects one at a time, making sure there's a high level of contrast. Usually children with CVI prefer maybe movement over static.
Okay.
Unfortunately, with CVI, you can also have children that if something moves, they don't see it at all. So you have, it's like, they've got both ends of the spectrum with CVI. But there's some very simple strategies that anyone can employ at home or in school or preschool that actually make a huge difference to children with CVI.
And you were just talking there about the processing of movement and how that can be distinct. Why is that? Or how is it that a person processes movement versus how a person processes something that is static, like an image?
It just depends on where the damage is in the brain. So if, for example, if something is moving, children will say, that they're able to see it better when they're moving. And so these children might be tend to rock a little bit.
Okay.
Or go from side to side. It helps them see. Particularly if you put them maybe in front of a screen or something, you might see them start a little bit of movement going. And then on the opposite side, we have the children that once something moves, it just disappears. And then their brain is not able to keep up with the movement.
Yes.
So they might see something over here, and when it's moved, they're still looking over here because the brain has not realized it's moved.
It's interesting then how a person can move themselves to compensate for how it is that their vision works. But I can imagine that that's something that can become complex in different settings. So for example, in schools, if children have a need to walk around a lot or to move in certain ways to process information, teachers who aren't aware of CVI or how it works might find that somewhat challenging. How is it that they should understand this?
So if you think when you have a vision impairment, sometimes you can make things bigger, will help you see better. Or opposite end, you can also sometimes children see better when things are smaller.
Yeah.
But for children with CVI, it's a processing problem. So everyday living is visual processing. When I go outside, I'm processing the light, I'm processing the movement in the trees, I'm processing the sun moving and the shadows that cast on the ground. So it's constant. So sometimes these children, when you're asking them that they need a break, it's not that they need to get up and move around. It's just that they need a break from visual material. And for some children, I just close my eyes and I have my own little break. And children will do that naturally themselves. We'll see them switching off. They'll drop their head.
They tell you what they need. Yeah.
Or they'll actually just disengage visually and they will stare off into space. And then when you say, "Are you okay? You ready to come back?" And they'll go, "Yes, I am." But then other children find that maybe doing an activity that they find really easy and soothing over and over again. So sometimes it again comes back to the individual. Some will need, I don't want to look at anything. Another, I just need something that I can do really easily. And it actually helps me relax, gives me a visual break, and then I'm ready to go again.
That's fascinating. I also like the idea that it's very much led by them in a sense. If you tune into what the child is doing, they're probably doing what they need.
Yeah, most of the time. And also when we're doing a lot of assessments, a lot of it's through observations, especially with the children who come to child vision, if we have access to see them in their primary school. It is just watching what they're doing on a daily basis in different environments, because even when we do assessments here, we do say that it's just a snapshot of the child. And at that exact hour, children are tired. That we usually have assessments in the morning because the children are fresher visually.
Yes.
Not just that, so it makes it easier for them to assess them in the morning rather than the evening. But you could imagine a lot of children, and this happens with any child with vision impairment, they might have a visual acuity, say, for example, 6/24 in the morning time. But by the time they go to the evening, because they're so tired using their vision, that visual acuity can reduce significantly, and that's when homework can be a real challenge for some little people.
That's fascinating. I also really like the idea that in a sense it's very person-led. It's like the child knows what is best for them and for their vision, and it's them who is taking control of the situation in a sense, and it's them who we can learn from.
Usually if the vision is the one that's more difficult for them to use, it's first to go.
Okay.
So that's why we see when children are suffering from visual fatigue, you'll see them with their head down.
Yeah.
They're starting to push away from the table. They might want to get up and walk around. And for maybe children who actually can't tell us, that's our signal that this child needs a break.
Absolutely. And we're also seeing a rise in the numbers of people who are diagnosed with CVI. Why is it that you think this is happening?
I think just through the different agencies around the world, CVI is being brought more to the fore, and people are recognizing the need for the diagnosis. I think sometimes CVI was always there. It's not a new thing.
Yeah.
But as well, we have a lot more medical interventions when children are born that maybe, you know, they're working around so long ago.
Yes.
But at the same time, people know that you can make a significant difference if you actually put strategies in place. And it's not just part of a learning disability, for example. And I think a lot of people have just got on with it.
Yeah.
You know, this is something like the latest statistics from CVI now, which is in the US, they're saying, like, say, for children with cerebral palsy, 70% of children with cerebral palsy could have CVI.
Wow.
There's like, so
That's
there's certain,
seriously significant.
yeah, and it's not just, it's a wide range of things that can affect children and could lead to CVI. I have to say that the ophthalmologists we have in Ireland in particular are really good. Like, they have a CVI clinic in Temple Street, and just because they did recognise the importance of getting these children a diagnosis and then being able to go and get some help, just to help them access maybe something in the education system, or for those children transitioning from like preschool to primary school, but also those young people transitioning into universities where they're really struggling, and vision, while they can see, they just don't see it the way anyone else does, because as you said, vision is such a personal thing, and we all see slightly differently. And like one of the ophthalmologists it would have explained to parents very well that, you know, we see with our brain, and our eyes are just a camera that takes the picture. It's our brain that tells us what we're looking at. So if you think of it that way, then everything you look at, you know, it can be your own personal opinion, depending on what you know and what you've learned.
Audrey, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
You're welcome.